Welcome, stargazers, to the Outlaw Astrology Podcast. I am APM, your intrepid star guide and cosmic detective, helping you to navigate these darker and deeper waters. And today we're exploring the fascinating intersection of astrology and true crime by delving into the profound influence of the asteroid goddesses in criminal astrology. Trigger warning, this episode contains discussions of criminal behaviour and potentially disturbing content. Housekeeping, remember to share, subscribe, rate, give us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts, and join our cosmic community on social media, Instagram, Pinterest and YouTube. You will find those links in the show notes. And we've a newsletter called The Daily Stargazer for those of you who want to connect with the stars on a daily basis, also in the show notes. And now on with the show. Alrighty, so we're going to talk about Pallas Athena and the other asteroid goddesses. In astrology, asteroids can be interpreted much like planets. They are the come-latelys to the astrological field, which is constantly expanding because space is vast and the number of objects within it is also vast. And so today we're going to cover at least 1, 2, 3, 4. So 3 asteroid goddesses and a minor planet. And the first is Pallas Athena, or Athena, in criminal astrology. So Pallas Athena in astrology is the warrior goddess of wisdom, strategic thinking, and reveals fascinating patterns in criminal cases. So some of the things that Pallas Athena can enlighten us about is analytical problem-solving abilities in investigations, and that does not necessarily have to be limited to criminal investigators. It could also be how the perpetrator may choose to deal with a crime or to plan a crime, or how to evade capture. That could be considered strategic thinking as well. Pattern recognition in criminal behavior, well, that would be the profilers, particularly if this is a serial murder case or a mass murder case, meaning explosion in a one-time event. And so strategic thinking is useful in criminal profiling because you want to understand who the criminal is, who the perpetrator is through their actions, since you don't usually have a face-to-face for a while. If we're not lucky for a while, there will be not much of a chance to have a conversation with the perpetrator until we get enough information and get enough raw data to be able to create a plan for capture, at which point then we can have that one-on-one. But most of the time we look at what they do, how they do it, and also try to ascertain and divine why they do it. And so criminal pattern recognition is especially useful. Now, strategic planning in both perpetrator and investigator charts is also important, because how a crime is planned, how it is committed, is in criminal profiling. These are pillars of understanding behavior. To understand what the criminal does, what the behavior is of the perpetrator, is also to understand who they are. And lastly, intellectual approaches to justice and resolution, meaning that you're going to need, once you've caught the person, now you're going to need to plan ahead for how you're going to try a case, what information you're going to share, and what information to mitigate or downplay for the best result, which is a conviction. And then whatever restitution needs to occur after that for the victim and the victim's families also requires planning, and planning requires strategy, which is Pallas Athena. Now, let's talk a bit more about the asteroid. The asteroid gets its name from a goddess of Greek myth. She was the goddess of war to Ares being the god of war. She was more cool-headed, strategic, and was a favorite to Zeus, the king of the gods, of the Olympian gods in particular. Her birth story is that she sprang from his head. He had an amazing headache, and that she sprang fully formed from his headache. So she's definitely the patriarchy's daughter, in most of the myths, tends to align herself along patriarchal lines and ideals. And so that is why she's associated with strategic thinking, but she's also about justice as well, the ability to weigh ideas, to weigh values, to weigh anything against its opposite, and to then decide, okay, which is the best choice. So she is the part of war that is strategic, that is losing battles in order to win the war, which is the ultimate goal. The Ares would be interested in winning every battle because he would feel he needed to win every battle in order to win the war, whereas Athena would have the opinion that, well, it's not likely that I'm going to win every battle, so I must choose the ones I'm going to win in order to win this war, which is my ultimate goal. So that is why Pallas Athena, or Athene, is associated with strategic thinking and justice, and tends toward Libra as the sign of comfort, particularly air signs, for this particular asteroid. I believe I've already shared a episode on the asteroid goddesses, so I don't want to go into deeply here on that, but the asteroid goddesses, most of them tend to be in orbit in the main asteroid belt, which is between Mars and Jupiter. Okay, so to give a little bit of astronomical information there. Now we've got Juno. And Juno traditionally is associated with partnership and commitment. And this one can offer also unique insights into more relation-based crimes. So Juno in criminal astrology can stand for power dynamics in relationships. And that could be if you have a duo committing a crime, a couple, whether or not they be romantically involved or otherwise, it could still stand for their relationship and their commitment. Betrayal patterns in relationship-related crimes, meaning that, maybe the crime was committed by the perpetrator because of betrayal. Maybe someone cheated or stole or lied. There are many, many true crime podcasts, TV programs, documentaries that have those particular catalysts as the set-it-off point for a crime being committed. Contractual violations and breaches of trust, well, stealing from someone, lying or cheating on them or cheating them out of something would definitely fall under this heading. Also, contractual violations, many a time has been that someone signed a contract to do a deal and then backed out or agreed to do something via contractually and then found some shady way to extract themselves, or maybe they just didn't know and extracted themselves, and it resulted in a lot of badness coming their way, okay? And lastly, domestic situation indicators. Most crimes are committed by people that we know, people in proximity to us, and more than likely we are going to be harmed, sadly, by people that we might live with and know very well. There are many, 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 many stories out there that have had documentaries about them, that have been featured on true crime podcasts, that have books written about them, in which one partner harms another partner fatally. And we can all, when I say that, those of us who are true crime aficionados will immediately think of a story that falls along those lines, because it is an often cited motivation for crime. It's money, it's jealousy, it's very rarely is it hatred, but as a rule, domestic situations can flare out of control and result in someone no longer being alive or very badly injured. Now, Juno, like I said, I've done an asteroid podcast already, but Juno is in the same asteroid belt with Vesta and Pallas Athena, and that's where it tends to hang out. And Juno is the Roman equivalent of Hera, Queen of the Gods in the Greek pantheon. And Hera, Queen of the Gods, was actually the sibling of Zeus, King of the Gods, that their father, Kronos, or Saturn, swallowed them whole, and the mother, Gaia, used magic potions to get them to be vomited back up and then had to hide them, but she got tired of him eating her children, and so he had to be overthrown, so she saved her children so that could happen, and eventually Zeus, or Jupiter, overthrows Kronos, Saturn, and takes his place on the throne as king of the gods. You see this story all over in many different cultures all over the world. And so Juno is the queen of the gods, who is prominent in quite a few stories. In the story of Heracles, otherwise known to the Romans as Hercules, she besets him with terrifying rages that results in the death at his hand of his wife and children. So that is a very Juno experience. The first time we're going to hear about murder and mayhem is going to be in the story of Hercules, who actually murders his wife and children because he's beset by rages by the queen of the gods, Juno, who is angry and jealous that her husband, Zeus, had an affair with Hercules' mom, resulting in Hercules. Okay, so those stories you're going to find a lot about Juno all over both Greek and Roman mythology. So that is that story. Okay, so now we've got Vesta. Now Vesta is the keeper of the sacred flame and illuminates aspects of dedication and focus in criminal cases, also traditionally. Vesta is known as Vestal Virgins. In Roman society, Vestal Virgins obviously were chaste. Now the original meaning of virgin was someone who did not belong to someone else, meaning an unmarried person who fended for themselves and more than likely did it rather well, because you wouldn't need to punish or demonize or turn it into chaste as in doesn't have sex with if this person wasn't killing it, knocking it out of ballpark here. So Vesta was the Vestal Virgins. They tended the flame, that Roman flame, and they were chaste and were not supposed to enjoy sex. They were supposed to stay a part of it. Vestal Virgins could also stop executions at their word. If someone's being executed and a Vestal Virgin stopped by, she could stay in execution. She had that kind of power. She was outside of the social norms of wives and husbands, but she could not stray too far. A Vestal Virgin found out to not be a virgin was usually executed. Now, the equivalent in Greek mythology was a Hestian virgin. They were more like fertility and creative goddesses. They represented a goddess, but they tended the flame, but it was more like they were meant to show the creativity and the fertility. So every so often there would be festivals, which would be orgies, and those orgies would result in drinking and fun and having a great time, obviously, and that will result in pregnancy for the Hestian virgins, which at that point meant to belong to the self and to not have a husband or belong to anyone else, including a father. So they were priestesses, okay? Yes, they tended to a flame, but if they got pregnant, it wasn't seen initially in Greek culture, way back when, not in the latter point, but in the way back when, they were priestesses, and if they got pregnant, it was seen as proof of their fertility, proof that Hestia was a powerful goddess and proof of, fertility, and that was considered desirous rather than something one would demonize. Okay? So, in criminal astrology, Vesta can be about obsessive behavior patterns because dedication and focus have a component of obsession. So does passion. So, obsessive patterns, meaning things that you're crazy about, mad for, can be obsessive. And so, hence, under Vesta's realm. Ritualistic aspects of crimes. There are quite a few crimes. For example, the Night Stalker crime was very ritualistic. And there are other crimes that I'm not going to name here, but we're going to name that one very ritualistic. And it's not uncommon for criminals, perpetrators, to have religious, occult, spiritual, mystical beliefs that underpin their belief system and worldview that make that the motivator for their crimes. Also, sacred space violations. Crimes are committed in churches, temples. I'm certain we can all name, us true crime lovers can all name a crime that happened in a temple. I have one at the top of my mind. I'm certain everybody listening has one at the top of their mind. It is not uncommon for religion and etc., etc., to be a motivating force in a crime. Dedication to solving cold cases or even solving that case, because there are criminal investigators who will literally make solving a crime their career focus. Yes, they may solve other crimes, they're working on other crimes, but in the back of their head, they are always going over this crime because they intend to solve it and bring it to resolution. So, dedication to solving cold cases and to solving present crimes. A dogged pursuit. Okay? And so, that is a way that Vesta could show up in criminal astrology. And also, I would add crimes of passion, because the sacred flame is also about that sacred creative spark, and passion can also be a criminal motivator. Many a crime that has partners, people involved, passion will play a part, and sometimes it can burn out of control. Next, we have Ceres in criminal astrology. And Ceres is classified as a minor planet, as I've said, and it holds the significance of understanding nurturing and loss in criminal cases. And traditionally, it's about maternal instincts to protect, to nurture, and even go to the absolute extremes when doing so. Okay, so maternal aspects in crimes. That could also be the mother in a crime, because sometimes, God forbid, or goddess forbid, we've got people out there who do harm children, and sometimes they're parents, and sometimes they're the mother. Okay, so I'm certain we can all name cases beyond cases in which the perpetrator was a mother, and the victim, the child. Okay, so that aspect in crimes, food related, because food is a symbol of nurturing, and this could be poison, or I know exactly what I'm thinking of. People who introduce poisons, like angels of mercy, or parents who have Munchausen's syndrome, meaning that they make, and there's a story on Hulu, and I can't recall the name of it, but it was a child who was led to believe that she was ill and disabled, or differently abled, by her mother for years, and did not question it until many different people, doctors, started going, wait a second, this case it's not adding up. These symptoms are not adding up. I'm suspicious. And eventually it rolled out that the mother was simply making the child ill, convincing the child that they were ill and differently abled or disabled, or physically challenged, if you like, so that she could get attention and get whatever that attention was going to get her, whether it be money or just people paying attention to her, making her feel special. So there's literally a documentary on the topic of using food or using our parent being the devouring parent instead of the nurturing parent. But food is nurturing. And angels of mercy tend to introduce toxic substances into food or IVs or what have you in order to perpetrate their crimes. Or sometimes a neighbor might use toxic substances to deal with unwanted neighbors. I'm thinking of a case. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm thinking of that top of mind. There's also environmental crimes, dumping of waste in areas and then not being honest about it, which resulted in crimes and resulted in death. And cases involving loss and grief, which is pretty much all cases. There is no case where someone's over the moon about losing a loved one. There's going to be grief. So you look at series in a criminal case about, loss and grief, how that loss and grief might be very personally experienced, particularly by a caretaker. Okay? So the series story is a very common story. People might have heard of it. And Ceres is the basis of the word cereal because she was a goddess of grain. In Roman mythology, she's called Ceres. In Greek mythology, she's called Demeter. And what happened was she is out one spring, out there and about with her daughter Persephone, doing what grain goddesses do. And her daughter is picking flowers because she's the goddess of spring. And she is kidnapped by Hades, the lord of the underworld, who is he who shall not be named. Because Hades was so feared, because he's the god of death, that people dared not speak his name because they feared that he would appear. So there's that long-term superstition, even in a society that was all about the mind. They had fears and superstitions as well. And so he kidnaps Persephone and escapes down to the underworld and makes her his companion. And since she's got nothing better to do, eventually she finds a space there by guiding lost souls in the underworld safely to where they should be or where they should belong, and also being a guide, in addition to being a guide, being a nurturing and caring force down there, which did not exist previously. Whilst this is happening above ground, her mum is at a loss. She's heartbroken. She goes for help and no one will help. None of the gods want to help, for one thing. And as a matter of fact, she's given the advice that she should just accept it, that he is a powerful son-in-law and it's just good business to accept it and get on with it. That's what they all wanted. She was not that type of person, that type of goddess. So she roams the earth and leaves her duties behind and roams the earth in despair, in grief, in loss of her child. And I'm certain we all can understand that. So Ceres can also be the loss and grief at the loss of a child. So in a case where a child is missing or a child has been harmed, we could look at Ceres to see more about that, to understand it better. Now, am I saying that the stars can be used to unequivocally solve cases? I'm speculating here. That should be kept in front of mind. Anyway, Ceres wandered the earth, encountering different people. And in some cases, she encountered minor gods and goddesses, and one of them taught her to laugh again because the earth was doing quite poorly. Because it turns out, without the goddess of agriculture, without the goddess of grain there to maintain things, things were doing quite poorly. The earth was crashing toward extinction. And if there are no people, because there is no earth, there are also no gods. The gods will no longer exist if there's no one there to say their names, to write petitions to them, to pray to them, to invoke them. But we are not at that point where it's accepted that they should do respect to Ceres at all, or Demeter at all. So as she's wandering through the earth, she becomes a nanny to a prince or princess, and so cares for the child that eventually she tries to bestow immortality on them. And how that is done is by putting the child in the flame of immortality, thereby allowing it to be burnt off. The parents come in, they're alarmed, they think this crazy lady's trying to kill their child, and they try to cast her out. Before they do so, she reveals herself to be a goddess. Okay, they have totally effed up. You don't piss off goddesses. You just don't. So, what can we do to fix this, dear goddess? Build me a temple. And they do it because we don't want to piss her off, okay? You see what she's doing. And when she gets that temple, she's like, I will now receive people. So people start turning up. And once the other gods see this, they go and say, okay, we better talk to her. So, hi, you think you might want to be the agriculture goddess again? And she's like, no, I don't think so. I'm not interested in doing that. So it turns out, once she got followers, once she got a temple, then they took her seriously. And once she was taken seriously, she had power too. And she was able to use that power to negotiate the return of her child, Persephone, for half of the year. And that was as best as it could get for her. And so that is why we're dealing with loss and grief. And so specifically, Ceres involves the loss and the grief in a case, but also if it also can talk about whether or not if a child is involved. If the case involves a child, I would look at Ceres absolutely. Okay? So that is, in a nutshell, the goddesses in criminal astrology. Now, I'm not going to, once again, I don't believe the stars determine anything, to be honest with you. I believe that they provide unique perspectives. So the asteroid goddesses offer unique perspectives that allow us to understand the criminal mind and the path to justice. So the path to justice, I would look at Pallas Athene to better understand that. So consider this. Choice governs our circumstances a great deal of the time, though not all of the time, for good or for ill. Okay? So, until our paths cross again under these wise stars, may justice and wisdom guide your way. Peace and astro magic.